Hey, what's going on, crew? Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to test out the Xiaomi Redmi Note 8 Pro. Now, I was able to take this camera out in the real world after about 1 week of having it, and it did have that 64 megapixel paired along with the other 3 in the quad camera setup. So let's just test out the cameras in the real world. So we are getting 4 different cameras. Now, this one is the front-facing camera, which is actually really nice, and it's going to be a 20 megapixel single camera for the selfies, which looks really good, and it has a wide angle at 2.0 aperture, and it also has 30 frames per second too. Now we are getting 3 cameras which you're able to switch, and you'd actually have to press stop and then just switch to the next camera, which isn't that bad. But on my Honor 9X Pro, I noticed that I didn't have to press the stop button. I could just continuously switch between them. But those cameras are definitely pretty sick. You're getting the 64, the 8 megapixel, which is ultra wide, and then the 64, which is wide, 2 megapixel, which is a dedicated macro camera, and the 2 megapixel for depth sensor. Now, this thing did have the ability to record in 60 frames per second, going on 1080. And 30 frames per second in 4K. So I definitely thought that was pretty cool that they did provide those 2 different options and allow you to get that feature. Also, you do get active noise cancellation with a dedicated mic too. So when you're recording, it's basically going to cancel out everything around you and just focus on what you're really hearing in the scene. Now, this phone did come with a lot of features such as fast motion, slow motion, plus a whole lot of other features as well. This thing was really useful. It wasn't a gimmick. You definitely could use this thing if you wanted to pick up a small glimpse of a moment, or just take pictures on that 20 megapixel, which came out pretty clear and very detailed as well. Now, I did take a couple of shots on that 64 megapixel just to capture some of the detail when I was actually zooming in. And what I did come to find was that detail was absolutely stellar for this budget device. Now, this is a mid-range device with a budget price point just under $250. But you can see this thing is absolutely a workhorse when it comes to the cameras. Anything you want to get in a glimpse of, or just take a picture of, you can see that this macro camera definitely worked pretty cool when you want to take like really good close-ups, or you could even use the wide angle mode as well when you want to just zoom out or just capture some really good detail with those dedicated camera modes. Now, I did have a lot of fun using this thing outdoors, and I was enjoying all the different details, but as you can see, as we switch the cameras, the color temperatures did adjust as well. But honestly, I didn't miss a beat. These cameras took every shot just as how I would have saw it in the real world. So I wasn't complaining whatsoever. You could see that ultra wide shot was able to just take a whole image of that view, which was really cool. And even that portrait mode definitely came out sick as well. But that 64 megapixel, and even this night mode, you can see that it just adjusts to the place I'm in, which is definitely sick. But when it came to the recording, stabilization did work perfectly fine, and I didn't have any issues whatsoever. Now, I can definitely say this phone does stand out in the camera departments. Even in low light, you won't get too much grain as I've seen on some other phones in this price point. Now, this thing handles dark settings very well, and you don't get much grain on the screen, so I wasn't complaining in any way possible. But you can see that 20 megapixel takes stellar and breathtaking cinematography, and I didn't have any issues with it either. Now, you can see while I'm moving that it will I'm actually walking, so obviously the stabilization isn't like 100% the best in the world, but you can see just walking down in the streets in New York City, you can see this is how it would look on a regular day. Oh, there goes the star right there. Happy holidays to everybody out there watching. I just switched the camera mode to a closer one so we could get a different perspective, which there is a little bit more grain on this camera because it is the 2 megapixel, I believe, as well. But here is a wide angle shot, which I'm capturing too, and I was able to capture a lot more, the whole street, what's in front of me, what's inside of me. Stabilization is actually pretty good on this mode as well, so I wasn't complaining in any way possible. I was able to get some really nice nighttime footage, which was definitely usable, and you can see I'm switching between all 3 cameras too. So I wanted to let you know that you do have to press that stop button when you switch between cameras, which to me wasn't too much of a big deal, or even nothing, like it wasn't a deal breaker or anything like that. But in nighttime, you can see how this thing handles the low light environment. Some other perks worth noting is the NFC built into this thing. We also do get SD card expansion up to 256 gigabytes. You get a chipset which is basically going to have liquid cooling inside of it for all those gamers out there, and the 9.0 MIU 10 with right on top of Android 9.0 Pie. We're getting a screen to body ratio of 84.9% and 19:59 ratio with 395 pixels per inch with 500 nits max brightness, HDR as well, and a 6.5 1080 by 2340 pixel screen, which is actually pretty cool. So I was enjoying this thing when it came to the hardware as well as the software in the cameras, to be more specific. And just to say the least, this thing didn't let me down, and it actually surprised me more than ever for this price point. I also did examine the outdoor performance and autofocus as well, and what I did notice was that the stabilization was actually pretty decent, and the autofocus and zoom capabilities that this thing did have to offer were actually pretty one as well. Now, one of the most pleasant things about this device is that in the dark environments, even when you zoom in, you can see that there's a bit of fuzz on there, but it's not as much, and not as much light blur as you would get on other cameras in this price point. But let's take a look at some different perspectives of the cameras that we're getting. And you can see the colors were actually pretty impressive, and the more we switched to a closer focal lens, it was able to capture more and more detail as well. But I was impressed the way this phone took shots in the night time, and it was able to capture a mixture of light and dark, as well as really bright and colorful, yet punchy and high contrast images as well. So I was really impressed with these pictures that I was getting, as well as the multiple angles and cameras that it did have to offer. And I was in the same position the whole time. I didn't move an inch. I was just moving the camera. Now this is the depth 2 megapixel macro camera dedicated, and a portrait shot as well. But the phone did take some really good images, just to say the least. This one you can see is a regular image, and then when we put the night mode on, it just brought out some of that dark contrast too. Even in low light environments, we got plenty light, and I didn't have any issues whatsoever. You can see how it just handled any environment that I threw at it. In 100% of the situations that I was in, I was getting a photograph that was usable 100% of the time. So I could definitely say that when it came to the Xiaomi Redmi Note 8 Pro and the quad camera setup, you can see when it came to stills, I was able to get just a ton of different footage here to work with and just use, and all of it was usable no matter what lens I was switching to. Now it was a little bit dark here, which I could easily have just turned the night mode on, which I didn't, because I wanted to show you guys how it would look on all four sensors without any adjustments at all. But when it did come to those angles and basically the shots that were coming out of it, honestly, for this price point, just to say the least, this thing did have an advantage over some of the other counterparts in the same arena of budget devices. But Redmi and Xiaomi, Redmi is Xiaomi, but they've been putting up some really good numbers and putting up some really good devices to match along with it. So if you found this video helpful in any way possible, hit the like button, show your appreciation, and hit the bell as well so you can get subscribed, notified, and check out more videos just like this. But it's your boy Serrano, and I'll check you guys later. Peace, crew. I'll see you on the next one.